Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan, and I'm joined by my co-host Brian, and we are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at HabslandPod. Now, on today's episode, we will discuss a turbulent week, celebrate the first line, and rank the Habs' best prospects. But first, quick playoff check. Following the Habs' pretty cool Sunday afternoon win against the Florida Panthers, we'll ask the same two questions we ask ourselves each week. How many teams are within 4 points of the last playoff spot? The number has gone up from 4 to 5. Detroit snuck back in, but also everyone lost the entire week, so it didn't matter. And then the second and most important question, are the Canadiens one of those teams? The answer remains yes. They are, as of recording, still in a playoff spot, I believe, regardless of the outcome of the New York Islanders game Sunday night. They will still be in a playoff spot when we all wake up on Monday morning. So, with that aside, Brian, I wanted to ask the important question. Is it my fault for jinxing Mike Matheson after giving him credit last week and literally saying he'll probably screw up against St. Louis, so let's give him his flowers now, and then he has one of his worst weeks of the season, if not as his entire tenure as a Hab? Is this all on me?
Jordan, as much as I love blaming you for stuff that isn't your fault, I think that's fun. No, of course not, because that's like saying, your statement was basically, I think, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think the sun's going to rise in the east tomorrow. I think that's what's going to happen. Okay. Mike Matheson makes mistakes. It just happens. Yeah. It's okay. We said it last week. We say it all the time. It's fine. The stuff he does positively is well worth all the giveaways and bad stuff. So if he messed up, he messed up. It's not the end of the world. And I mean, it wasn't just him. It was not just him.
No.
The team was so flat. I'd say in all 3 games leading up to the Florida game. So you can't pin a bad week on Matheson. But yeah, absolutely. Thank God all of the teams that are chasing the Habs have also played like crap these past couple weeks. Like, of all the teams in the East that are behind the Habs in terms of points, only the Penguins and the Sabres are above NHL 500 in their last 10 games. And both those squads have been dead in the water for a long time. Mm-hmm. So like, literally anyone who can catch the Habs did not have the week they should have if they really wanted to.
Yeah. So I think the tenor of this episode was like on a knife's edge in that third period against the Panthers, because there is very much a real chance, especially when the Habs went up 1-0 and then immediately concede, and you're like, oh my God, again, this is happening? Like, we're just keep reliving the same game over and over again. Third period, posted on Blue Sky, said, look, Habs management said we want to be in the mix. It's the end of March, the biggest period, third period on the road, game is tied. Welcome to the moment. Can you meet it? And I think 5 guys specifically who it felt like they were on the ice the entire third period of Nick Suzuki, Juraj Slafkovsky, Cole Caulfield, Lane Hudson, and Caden Gooley. It felt like they were on, I haven't checked the numbers, it felt like they were on the ice 9 or 10 of those 20 minutes, except for that final shift where Gallagher you and I were just talking about it, like Gally scores the empty netter, the insurance goal, but karma for not drawing a penalty earlier when his stick just got ripped out of his hands. There was no way on earth Gally was making it to center ice. And I think Marc Denis clocked that too on the broadcast, where he's like, you were saying like how long Gally had the puck for. It's because he was doing the math and said, is like, I can't do 5 strides right now. I might collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't skate it to center, and I also can't miss the net, because then it's a face-off in our zone, and maybe you and I are less happy right now on the pod, because that it would have gone it could have gone the other way. Yeah. But thank goodness Gally took that extra, second or 9 to really plan that shot out. He looked like one of those guys at center ice, like Mac and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where you get to shoot from center and score on that mesh goalie and win whatever $10,000 or whatever the thing is. He looked like that, and kudos, Gally. That's a big win. Way to tie the bow on that.
So let's hop into our headlines in part 1, headlines of the week. So Brian, I told you ahead of time on Saturday what I thought the headline of the week should be. However, very much in adjusting to the moment, I've changed a headline in the last minute. I'll tell everyone what it is in a second. The headline of the week is better late than never, because boy, oh boy, well, honestly, since the Islanders game about a week and a half ago, that's when the losing streak started. And they kind of they played decently in that game. Goaltending wasn't there. You and I talked about it. It was kind of 50-50. Colorado, raging comeback, but still did not play a great game. And then the first 2 games this week with St. Louis and with Philadelphia. You can rationalize it all you want and say, hey, hottest team in hockey, and then another team getting the new coach bump of, everyone's feeling free. I mean, Matvei Michkov's feeling pretty good with the new coach. I can tell you that right away with how many goals he's scoring. He scored already 4 goals since
Unreal.
since Torts has been fired. However, the Canadiens also played terribly in both of those 2 games. I do want to put like a bit of a dividing line there with the Carolina game and then Florida. Like, they definitely turned the corner a bit, so that's why it's better late than never. The initial headline for this for this week was straight to voicemail, because I had thought they had just not answered the call for what was the biggest week, the last big road trip of the season. So I know we're feeling great, Brian, about the huge win against the Panthers, but if we're encapsulating the entire week, it's good that they trended upwards in terms of their quality of play, but there's still something concerning, I think, with those first 2 games.
You calling it straight to voicemail initially. I was going to say today, oh man, sorry I missed your 3 calls, but I'm here now. That's really what the Habs were saying on Sunday. Sorry I missed the 3 calls, but let's have a really good conversation now, because they picked it up in Florida, and thank God they did. I think that's fair. Earlier I said that all 3 games were really bad. Carolina was better than Philly and St. Louis, but it still wasn't at the level that they were in Florida. And it's fine for you to throw a bone and say, St. Louis is the hottest team in the league right now, and Philly the new coach bump, but every winning streak comes to an end. It could have happened. And with the Philly thing, like, not every team gets the new coach bump. Matvei Michkov, you're right. He's absolutely dancing out there. He must be having so much fun now, and everybody predicted that. But what I didn't like, I'd say especially in Philadelphia, was they could just not hit the net with anything. Mm-hmm. There were swarms of opportunities where the Canadiens were buzzing in the offensive zone, and this happened to every single line, but mostly the top line, and even on the power play where they're buzzing, they're making really good seam passes, they have like a really high danger scoring chance, and it sails 2 feet over the net, or way off the net, or it's just a flub of a shot. And that happens so much that, like, this was a high scoring affair. It could have turned much earlier had the Montreal Canadiens hit the net with some of those shots, and not even necessarily scored on them, but at least produced rebounds, because Philly was definitely susceptible to shenanigans in front of the net, as well the Canadiens were too, but I think that would have turned the game around significantly. So the not being able to hit the net, that's just such a basic, turn the speed of your shot down 8% and you'll be able to hit the net. Like, that's just such a simple adjustment that I didn't understand why it wasn't being made earlier. Maybe you could coin it to bad luck, but that one really bugged me in the Philadelphia game. Did you notice that too? What bugged you about the lack of, I guess, results and the play?
So it's interesting that you immediately went towards the offensive side of the game. That's where you're disappointed. The disappointment was. Me, it was defensively, which I think probably there is the right answer, that it's both, right? Like, when you lose 6-1 and 6-4 on back-to-back games, there's a lot that must have gone wrong. I thought defensively they were just careless in transition, very much harkening back to those first 10 games of the season, where it was like, have you not practiced a breakout before? And it,
right.
Like, that's what the issue was in the first 10 games. This was just carelessness with the breakout. Like, they knew what they were supposed to do. They just were choosing not to do it. I don't know. I don't think there was much game score effect because they were down big and they kept trying to make more and more, like, increasingly riskier plays. But I thought that was quite poor. I thought Jakub Dobeš was very bad on, where was that? That would have been Thursday night.
So on that, I'm really fearful that I was absolutely correct in saying that you don't let your backup go like 2 weeks without playing a game, because he's going to come back in really rusty. That's really what it looked like to me. And you're dead on defensively, man. You said late in game store doesn't affect it. It definitely doesn't, because in that Philly game, both of the first 2 goals, Michkov and Delorier, it was a guy in front of the net with 3 or 4 Montreal Canadiens just standing there not covering him. Michkov snuck in, nobody saw him, and he got the one-timer in, and Delorier did basically the same exact thing. And the Canadiens were sort of just apathetic defensively in that regard. So it's definitely not like game score affecting things.
Right. I mean, like, look, it's not like they cleaned all of that up in the last 2 games. In I want to say the first period against the Panthers, Lane Hudson it was on the power play, but had one of those drop passes that most of us despise, and immediate turnover. Luckily, Suzuki was just not having it and just laid out the Panther to get the puck back. But those, again, it's like, it's less so about, like, the beginning of the season, it really did feel like they did not know how to do a breakout. This week, it was more about, like, they know what they're doing, but they're just being a little careless with it. You cannot, at least it's not excusable to chalk it up to fatigue. They just came back a little over a month ago. Basically, the entire team had 2 weeks off, and this is when you're supposed to start peaking. It's mid-March onwards, post-trade deadline onwards is when the team is supposed to be peaking. So I don't know what you can attribute to other than a lack of focus, and it's also, I know there's playoff experience across the board between, David Savard has a playoff experience, Alex Newhook, and of course, like Anderson, Gallagher, Suzuki, Coffey. Like, there's enough guys on the team that have playoff experience, so you can't chalk it up to that. But I wonder if it's been so long for some of them that games that matter, like the way in what, like how you choose to play as a team and not necessarily as an individual, might be starting to conflict a bit in small moments, right? And that's all that hockey is. You screw one thing up like Carrier did for I'll mix it up, whether it's the first or the second Florida goal on Sunday, and boom, that's it. You give up a goal and it's tied again. So yeah, it's turbulent week, and it's nice that they turned it around. Caden Gooley was not great against Carolina, but I thought he was so much better, unsurprisingly, when you're off for 6 weeks, however long he was gone for. And we can talk maybe briefly about and this is this here, what we're learning is who does St. Louis trust and what groupings and pairings does he trust. The first line is the first line. I have a stat about them later on. They just score a crap load of goals. The second line is still a disaster. He still has no freaking clue what to do, it's not St. Louis, not finding the right answers. That the right answer is not probably on the team. But the entire defensive core, all 6 of those, well, 7 with the Jack-Eye now, they just keep bumping and moving around. So we saw Hudson Struble get broken up. It's now Hudson Gooley, which I think push is going to come to shove soon, Brian, and I think that will be the de facto number 1, and they're just going to have to ride those guys 25 minutes because we saw Matheson Carrier move around a bit. We had Jack-Eye in for a 7th game, so that's another place where, and I want to know what you think about, what is the right approach right now for the 6th defenseman?
He has it right in the top 4 right now. I'll say that. In terms of who's there, the pairings themselves you can shift. You can put Carrier back with Gooley; they work well, and Matheson Hudson worked well for a little while. You can sort of move those guys around. I'm happy. It's more the bottom pairing that's a hard decision. And I'll tell you what I didn't like, and this ties into the trios as well. I didn't like Pizzetta getting drawn back in.
Yeah.
I would almost rather have 7 defensemen at this time and then just give that extra ice time to the first line. Throw one of those wingers in with another line when you're trying to spark something. And also, Armia deserves more ice time. Anderson definitely lately deserves more ice time. Gallagher, all these guys are chomping at the bit to get out there as much as they can and produce or defend or whatever needs to get done in that game. So I have no issue with running 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, at least until you've ironed out who can draw into the lineup on forward, just because Pizzetta doesn't belong anymore, man, no. At all. You saw Marty smiling on the bench in the Florida game because he couldn't get Dvorak back out there for a draw in the defensive zone. He tried to cheekily replace Pizzetta with Dvorak after an icing, and he obviously was not allowed to do it, and he's smiling on the bench like, crap, I really wish I could have, because he's thinking what we're all thinking. Pizzetta in the defensive zone, and Florida's putting out an offensive line. What's going to happen here? So, yes, he brings the physicality, but I think Jack-Eye's physicality is not only better, but he's better at his position. Having 7 defensemen sucks for the ice time, but Savard having a bit less ice time would improve the quality of his play when he's out there. And I think that limiting the times when Jack-Eye gets exposed is also going to do the same thing. So if Jack-Eye and Savard sort of share but a little bit more.
But how much can we cut? Because in the biggest games right now, those guys are down to a dozen minutes at this point. Savard might be a bit higher because of the penalty kill. But I thought there was an interesting commentary from Arpin Basu this week about the Canadiens very much co-prioritizing, if that's definitely not a word, the Laval Rocket season with the Montreal Canadiens season. And if this was an all-in Montreal Canadiens season and he was healthy, Reinbacher, I think, would be on the team by now, right? I think same would go for whether it be Owen Beck or whether it be Florian Jack-Eye. I feel like some of these guys might have made the jump. And that's why I think maybe Pizzetta is going to draw in. That's why it's kind of just, bite down the mouth guard and take a couple hits if you're the third pairing with Jack-Eye Savard or Savard and Struble, whatever ends up being. I don't know if there's a good answer this year. What I'm really wondering is how hard can you ride Hudson Gooley down the stretch? Because I think there will have to be a decision, and I don't have the schedule in front of me, but if I were to guess in the next 9 games, there's at least one back-to-back. Other than that game, I think those guys are probably going to have to be in the 25-minute zone. Now, that's probably easier for Goulet to handle because he is second PK unit and not on the power play at all, whereas Hudson's first wave power play. So that might be, maybe you skip a Hudson shift here or there and you just throw someone else out there with Goulet. But if those guys can be at 25 minutes, you were saying about Mathis and Carrier, like, I don't know if you can put them up 24 minutes a game, 25 minutes a game. I think that has to come down. But at the end of the day, you need defensemen to play 60 minutes, well, almost 60 minutes a game, because, power play reduces that, but you probably have 110, 112 minutes to distribute. And if you're giving, let's say, between Hudson, Goulet, Matheson, Carrier, 95 of those minutes, you still need 10 minutes each for your third pairing guys. So it's an imperfect solution. What I'm interested in seeing over the next 9 games is how much does Marty, because now we're going for it. They're in a playoff spot. Like, how much does he scale that time up in these next 9 games, and how much is going to fall on Goulet and Hudson is my question.
I'm very interested to see that too. And the next 3 games are against teams that forecheck hard, that are very physical, as we just saw against Philly, as we just saw against Florida, because we're playing Florida next, then Boston, then Philly, and then Nashville. That one should be a little bit easier. But those next 3 games at home, I'm thinking that Jack should draw back in, whether it's at the expense of Savard. I don't think it should be at the expense of Struble, honestly, because he's been playing such good hockey lately, even on the right-hand side when he was playing with Hudson. So if it's Savard that draws out and Struble goes to the right, that might actually be the most perfect solution. It would give Savard a break, if nothing else, for a couple games. I don't know who takes his spot on the PK, but maybe Struble is capable.
Yeah, that you can solve. My question is, has Savard ever been healthy scratched by St. Louis?
No, definitely not. He's a vet, at least not to my memory, not to my recollection.
So I think that'd be a tough one to swing in the last 2-3 weeks of the season. But I get it. I hear it. Look, there's no great solution there. If we want to touch on the second line quickly before we go into each of our own individual headlines, which, I mean, mine kind of touches on the second line a bit, but we can still go into it. Like, there was the Owen Beck audition. There was the Joshua Roy audition, which seems to have ended. Michael Pezzetta drew into the lineup, and that meant that Emil Heineman got some time on the second line. There was also a game where, like you said, there was a 7th defenseman, and it was just kind of dealer's choice, open mic night, who for whoever was going to be on the opposite wing of line A. What's going on? What are we doing here? Is it just searching endlessly?
I mean, for the time being, yes. We're biding time until next season and somebody comes over, but we'll get to that in our second half of the episode. For now, we're absolutely just searching for something that doesn't exist right now. And I'm glad they give a shot to Heineman, because he's been a very good fourth liner all year who shows more offensive spark than most fourth liners do, especially at his age. So yes, you throw him up, you give him a shot. Has it worked yet? No. Does that mean you stop it right away? Also, no. Like, you have to give him a little bit more time, I think, with those guys on the top unit. One of the 3 has been exceptional, and I know that that's the topic of one of the headlines here, your headline of the week, Jordan. So unless you have, you know what, let's just jump into it, because the second line's going to be the topic. What is your headline? Because I'll leave it to you. It's yours.
Yeah, this is my headline is just resubscribe. I'm buying in for another year of Alex Newhook. He has successfully drawn me in enough to be intrigued for another season. The first 35 games or so, it was kind of like, what's going on? What happened to Alex Newhook? Where was this guy who in the last 20 games of last season was a really good second line center, flying up and down the ice, being pretty decent defensively and contributing on the offensive score sheet? I think it might have been a career high in points despite playing less games as well. And everything was pointing upwards. First half of the season as a debacle. And then it's just like gotten better and better and better and better. And now, like, he just kept creating offensive opportunities with his speed, whether it was in transition or when they were on the cycle. Him and Line, it's just kind of like, we don't know what else is going on with whoever the other winger is going to be, but you two have to figure out how to create some chemistry together. And it's happening.
Right.
And it's happening very slowly, but it's happening. Yeah, he's intrigued me enough that I think the interesting question will be like, who's the second line center going into next season? I don't think it's like he's earned it, but I also think, like, of the players in the organization right now, he would be my odds-on favorite, and he would be my pick most likely. Because I think he has just intrigued me enough down the stretch here where I'm like, you know what? Give me another year of this. I would like to see more. There's 2 more years on the contract. He's RFA after that. There's no huge decision that needs to be made. I like it. we need to figure out what happened in the first 30 games, and not just him. We need to know what happened the first 30 games with Kirby Dach and with Juraj Slafkovsky as well, because I don't know if they didn't come into camp in shape, or if I don't know what was happening, but those 3 guys to start the year, Dach we gave a little bit of slack to, but the other 2, no, like there's none. And hopefully next September in training camp, those guys come ready, hit the ground running. But so that's kind of what I've had my eye on this week, of like Alex Newhook just kept having these moments and you're like, whoa. Yeah, he's intrigued me enough, and in whatever capacity he ends up being as a middle 6 forward. Like that's as vague as you can probably get these days, but I'm still intrigued with Alex Newhook.
Well, if you want to see what his ceiling is, just go back and watch the entire Philly game, because that he's playing like a top 6 forward in that game, and not just the goal. I'm not just talking about the goal. His pace, his decision making, his passing was crisp when everybody else's seems to not be. Like he was probably the best Montreal Canadien against Philly. If not the best, he was among the top 3. So really thrilled you're bringing him up. He was a big time question mark for a long time. And about Slafkovsky and him and all these guys who had tough starts, that was basically the difference between the Montreal Canadiens being comfortable in a playoff spot right now and in the situation they are now, right? Going, I forget what it was. I think it was 4-9-1 or something awful in the first 15 games of the year. You win 2 more of those games and you're right next to Ottawa battling for the first wild card spot, and everybody else is way beneath you and probably gives up. So it's meaningful to start a season strong. It's really important. It sets the tone for the entire season. If you can figure out who you are as a team and the style that you play and be sharp right out of the gates, like it just makes the rest of your season so much easier. Now they're having to fight tooth and nail just to stay in a playoff spot when it could have been easy. So back to Newhook specifically, though, thrilled that he's been figuring it out. And these last sort of 10 games of the year, I think we're really going to sort of see where he's going to slot in next year, though I'm fairly convinced it's going to be a third line winger. I think that I'm fairly confident that he's not going to remain in the top 6 with who's coming over.
Could be the center role. We'll see.
Could be the center role.
I think
could absolutely
they'll
be the
probably
center
still defer to Kirby Dach unless someone from outside the organization is brought in. I'm going to assume the default assumption is going to remain Kirby Dach. It's going to be Occam's razor, and that Newhook will be bumped to the third line. And again, it depends who are the centers on the roster. If Dvorak is out and no one else is brought in, he might be the favorite to be the third line center.
That's fair. If
Owen Beck or Oliver Kapanen make the team and they want those guys at center, I can see Beck Newhook, to the wing, but we'll see. If we can transition from my headline into yours, I have a stat that kind of, I think, aligns with it. At 5-on-5, this is according to Natural Stat Trick. Now it's imperfect because, it doesn't account for all the goals at 5-on-5, but Montreal Canadiens goals at 5-on-5 by first line, second line, third line, fourth line. So the way I've looked at it is any first line goal has Suzuki or Caulfield on the ice. Any second line goal has 2 of Newhook, Line 8, Dach on the ice because of the injuries and all that. At least 2 of those guys on the ice.
Okay.
There was a moment, of course, where all 3 of them were the second line, but the first part of the year, it was just Dach and Newhook, and now it's more Newhook and Line 8. We've talked about it. Third line is Dvorak, Gallagher plus someone else, and then the fourth line, of course, is Evans, Armia plus someone else. So again, this is not all the goals scored. I think the Canadiens have something in the neighborhood of 160 goals, more or less, at 5-on-5. Then this is just all goals. It doesn't necessarily have to be scored by these players, but when they're on the ice, these are their goals. It still probably misses about 30% of their goals, but anyways, the stratification will tell you tell the story of the season, really. The first line has 54, the second line has 16, the third line has 21, the fourth line has 14.
Holy crap, that's way less than I thought it would be for the second
So
line.
again, I think there's just generally probably all of these need to be bumped up 20 to 30%. If I had done more than 20 minutes of research on this, or some more analyzing, but I think it's the scaling, right? Of 54, 16, 21, 14. Okay, the 21 and 14,
that's fine.
I think that kind of makes sense. And I'd have to check if the Gallagher goal would count. It probably does, because it was 6-on-5, 5-on-5. I don't know if NST counts that.
Well, they count for Ovi in his case,
so
they should count.
Third
for
and fourth line kind of makes sense. The fourth line's been dead quiet from an offensive standpoint, but when you look at the fact what they do on the first wave of the penalty kill, those guys, Evans and Armia specifically, combined have 6 shorthanded goals. They do a lot more. It's the second line. The second line has 16 goals by this metric. Again, it's probably closer to 2021, but like that's the story of the season for the offense.
Especially because they have one of the most talented snipers in the world in Patrick Laine, but he seems to only function on the power play when given time and space, and a clean one-timer in his office. So, yeah. I mean, I said it was surprising. That was my initial reaction, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, that pretty much tracks. Like, I thought it would be closer to maybe 25, but that tracks that it's way lower. And I would absolutely venture a bet that most of the teams in a playoff spot right now, their second line is producing closer to like 75% with the first line.
Yeah, I think so.
60% with the first line.
That's what you want.
It's like most teams have much more balance. Exactly. That's what you want. The top two lines to be producing a decent amount of scoring, which the Canadiens are not.
Yeah. So about that first line, I said that's 54 goals ish at 5-on-5. Brian, let's roll into your headline, because boy, there's a lot to talk about with the first line.
Yeah, absolutely. With the first line, there's a lot to talk about. And today, on the day that we're recording, Sunday, March 30th, I want to say happy birthday, Uri. Turned 21 on Sunday, celebrating with a go-ahead power play goal versus the Panthers. And it was a gift. It was a birthday present, honestly, because it was a bank job that he meant to give the pass to Caulfield, but it banks off the defender and goes in. We will absolutely take it. And of course, Uri Slafkovsky, we all know his future is so bright. We're seeing that as a 20-year-old, he was awesome. So the future should be really bright. But let's take a moment to talk about what he's already accomplished, Jordan. As a Hab, aged 20 years or younger, Slafkovsky is first all-time in assists, second all-time in points, and third all-time in goals. Amongst all NHL players, he's 85th in assists. That's the cool one. The other two are a little bit lower than that, but that's still pretty cool. Anytime you're in the top 100 of all NHL players of all time, like tens of thousands of players, that's very, very impressive. And by the way, with that very fortunate bank-in power play goal that he scored on Sunday, Slav is second all-time in the NHL in goals per game at 21 years old. One goal in one game. Simple. You can definitely guess who's third all-time, Jordan, with 71 goals in 80 games as a 21-year-old.
Oh, is it Gretzky?
Yeah, it is Gretzky, the great one. Anyway, all of this to say about Uri Slafkovsky, a very, very impressive start to his career so far. The first line as a whole is the most consistent element, and they've done all this while having a rough start, as we mentioned before. And that's maybe the most impressive thing about their totals at this point, is that even with, and Slafkovsky included in that, because his start was rougher than any on that first line. So him being in this position, had he not had that rough start, I think he would have passed Mario Tremblay easily. He's only 8 points behind him as a 20-year-old or younger, and 18 less games played. So had he played a little bit better to start, he definitely would have passed him, I think. The big difference between those guys is the plus-minus. Tremblay plus 54, Uri minus 33, but obviously the teams were a little different in these two eras.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also indicative, like, look, that first line, that third period, the first line came out, and they were like, okay, it's go time. Let's do it. They met the moment. They were ready to go. Nick Suzuki was not messing around this entire game. I'm happy that people keep bringing up the whole, like, Suzuki saying, keep everybody together, we want to do this, to Kent Hughes, because I think it's a win-win for the front office. Because if they screw up and they don't make the playoffs, Hughes says, I don't have to listen to you anymore. But if they do make the playoffs, it is like, hey, we know Nick Suzuki's a good leader, but like, it's an early notch of like, hey, I said, let's keep it together. We're good. Let's go. We made the playoffs. That first line puts the team on their back. They did it for a while. They cooled off for 4 or 5 games. It seems like they picked it back up, and it's perfect timing. There's 9 games to go. They need to keep going. Nick Suzuki, by the way, I know plus minus, you were just bringing up. It's a bit of a flawed stat, obviously. Nick's a plus 10. Like, that's on this team that I think is overall is a minus 22 now. Like, that's obviously in all situations, but Nick Suzuki being a plus 10 is not a joke. I think that's another guy who 9 games to go, maybe 1 or 2 back-to-backs. Like, Marty's got to ride him 21, 22 minutes a game. I would take him off the penalty kill completely and just go, like, I don't mind the 11 forwards idea, and you just give extra shifts to Suzuki and Heineman and Slafkovsky and Caulfield, and, like, don't make it always be the first line, but for the most part, yeah, just get them in there as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. A guy you can add to that list is Hudson, and we talked about him a little bit, but now he's on the verge, like he just passed Chelios. He's on the verge of becoming first all time by a rookie defenseman in terms of points, and he very easily could get there with a handful more in the 10-ish remaining games. So that's another guy that just bump up his ice time, definitely.
Yeah. Well, look, this is it. There's 2.5 weeks left to the season, and game by game, we're learning more and more. The goaltending still needs to be there. We haven't really talked about Montembeault. I thought Monty was really good against Carolina, bouncing back. Look, you gave him one night off, and look how much better he was, right? There is some truth to that. Like, I do agree that icing Dobish for that long doesn't look great, and I'm going to assume Dobish gets 1, max 2 more starts down the stretch here, and it's just going to be riding Monty as much as they can. It just seems like that was the choice that was made in the last 2-3 weeks, and
yeah, you're probably right. So there's 2 back-to-backs left.
So 2 games.
There's the Philly and Nashville, and then there's the Ottawa-Toronto. So I think 2 is the minimum, unless they're pulling the stuff that they were pulling when Primo was still on the team. But Dobish has not been that bad. He definitely doesn't deserve to be benched during a back-to-back, I don't think. But don't wait too long either. Like if you're gonna, right. I guess they can't because it's this week. It's gonna be Philly or Nashville. Probably in Nashville, the second game they would give to Dobish to guarantee they beat Philly at home.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to give Dobish Philly again after just giving it to him. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. I did want to mention briefly on the Carolina game. Like, I thought the Habs played fine. I thought they played well, but like as boring as Carolina is, and man, they are just mind-numbing. They played their perfect Carolina game on Friday night. Like, they know exactly how to play. It's boring point shots, and then they just kill you in the corners to get the puck back after there's a rebound. And their whole game is predicated on, let's keep the puck, and we'll just take enough shots, and we have just enough skill. And that's why it was kind of scary when they had Mikko Rantanen for a minute, because Theory could like break through that system with so much more skill. Didn't work out, oh well, but they played the perfect Carolina game on Friday. And Monty was really good, and I thought the Habs probably could have gotten one in the third and made it a bit closer. It didn't end up happening, but they started to turn the corner in that Carolina game. Just Carolina played like to the T of what a Hurricanes game is, and like that crowd was good. I know they were a little obnoxious, but hey, it was a good crowd on a Friday night.
Yep, definitely. You're right on all points about Carolina. They played exactly their game. And on the topic of good crowds, God, man, it just feels so good to hear the ole oles from a different building than the Bell Center. We were hearing them from Florida at the end of that game. That was extremely cathartic to hear that after a rough week.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I think with that, Brian, we'll transition into the second part of the episode. We do this every year around this time. Usually the Habs are kind of out of it, so we kind of blow it up and do like a huge part of the episode about this. I think we'll truncate it a little bit, but we're going to do our Habs top 10 prospect rankings. So I guess a couple rules on it. Who and what is a prospect in the Montreal Canadiens farm system? So the rule Brian and I have gone with over the past, it has not failed us, and we shall not turn our backs on it at this time. So basically, if you're eligible to be in the Calder race next year for the best rookie in the NHL, you are still a prospect. What that means is, of course, Lane Hutson would no longer be eligible for that. Also,
he will have already won the Calder.
He will be a Calder Trophy winner. So he's obviously not going to be eligible anymore. Emil Heineman will have played enough games this season, certainly, to no longer be eligible. And Joshua Roy, because he's played at least 6 games in back-to-back seasons, will also not be eligible. Unless I missed anyone else, Brian, those are the only names off the board. The one name that we didn't mention that some people might be thinking about is Jakub Dobish. The criteria is to play at least 25 games. I feel like there's a goalie clause, but I might just be overthinking it. So
I couldn't find one, but there definitely should be.
Yeah.
Because goalies play less games. Like, Dobish is not...
Should be 15, probably, right?
Yeah, I think that's more right. That's like a backup if your starter plays a huge amount, and that's enough, I think.
So Dobish is still eligible, ultimately, for this year. Yeah, so let's get into it. Brian, I have 1 or 2 questions, because like we're going to go into, we know who number 1 is. We know generally what the order is going to be. There's some interesting discussions once we get to the back half of the top 10. And I think what we've discussed is I'll present to you my top 10, and I'll let you, I know you prepared your own, but like we'll just see how we might differ. Overall, though, my first question is, like, we started this podcast during the 2022 NHL draft. That draft class for the Canadiens is likely going to become an all-timer because of Slavkovsky, Hudson, but then Machar, Beck, Engstrom, Davidson. They also trade for Kirby Doc. Like, that is just an absolute all-timer. 23, rounding into form, I think, quite nicely. David Reinbacher, of course, Jacob Fowler, trading for Alex Newhook, and Florian Jacki, who I'm sure is going to come up in this discussion. So 23 is looking good. What about 2024? We obviously have Ivan Demidov in there. Michael Hage, we'll get to him. He'll obviously be in the top 10. But beyond that, Brian, I don't know what to feel about the rest of these guys. No one in this year or so, and look, 22 has had 3 seasons since the draft. 23 has had 2 seasons since the draft. These kids have only had 1. So obviously we're not crossing anybody off yet. Tyler Thorpe, Owen Protz, Atos Koivu, Logan Sawyer, those are kind of like the next guys in 24. No one's really like jumped off the page the way that Lane Hudson immediately did, the way that even Adam Engstrom immediately did. So how are you feeling about the 24 draft? Like, if we're just grouping all of them, like 22 is like 7 players basically that we think are doing something. 23, it's a smaller group, but like it's still a lot of like positivity towards like the future of the team is going to be in 23. 24, we have 2 guys that we feel pretty good about. But other than that, am I missing something? Or is there someone else that's kind of like drawn your eye? Or is it, should I just tell myself to be a bit more patient with this class?
I mean, I'll give you one example that might make you a little more interested, though you've already named him, so he's been on your radar. Tyler Thorpe, I like a lot. I think that he hasn't really even shown the potential yet, and he's having basically a fairly good season with the Vancouver Giants in the WHL, like a good, productive offensive season. He's a big dude. I think he'll transition well eventually. But more importantly, 2 out of 7. That's the magic number. You get 7 draft picks. If you hit on 2 of them, you've had a good draft. That's what most hockey experts, people that know hockey and know drafting, that's what they say. And you have the 2, and what a 2. Oh my God, Demidov and Hage, are you kidding me? I don't know that there's anybody else in the league that rivals that for the 24 draft. Obviously the team's at the top, but in terms of a pair of guys at where they were drafted, the value gotten there, the Habs are just head and shoulders above the rest. So just with those 2, I'm absolutely thrilled with the 24 draft. And I'll remind you, I don't know if you felt this way, but I certainly felt a little bit this way, that last year at about this time, I wasn't particularly over the moon about the 23 draft. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't like those lower guys were jumping off the page yet either. So I think it just needs a little bit more time. I think Thorpe will show us some stuff. Koivu's still a really kind of lethal sniper with a great shot, and he's still rounding out the other parts of his game. So there could be other gems there. You never know. I think it's just still much too early to tell.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note specifically for Koivu that he was one of the younger players in the draft. So he was age 18 basically. And I do want to start being more intentional with when we refer to players, and I'm hopefully start doing this more and more often, is we often say with prospects, like, oh, it's their D+1, D+2 years, basically like there's the year you are draft eligible, and then it's, 1 year after draft eligibility, 2 years after draft eligibility. I think it might be a better exercise to say like, this was his age blank year. So like technically Atos Koivu, this is his D+1 year, but he's 18 all season, which is the same as a lot of the guys who are going to get drafted in June. Same goes for, Slavkovsky is a great one. Slav has been 20 all season until now. So it's D+3, which is typically attributed to being 21 years old. But truly, Slav who has a slightly later birthday, this was his age 20 season. So I want to, for me, I want to start looking at it more in terms of like, well, how old are they? Because that's more important than like what draft eligible year we're in here. So for Koivu, this is age 18 year. Who knows? The year was okay for him, it seems. I think Owen Protz is another guy who had a little bit of development going. I think he's playing in Brantford in the OHL. We'll see. I think like there's a lot of iron still in the fire here. It would be nice, kind of like Florian Jacki, for one of these guys to jump up a level. And maybe that happens in the CHL playoffs, or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't. And it's not like the cupboards are bare anyway. Before we get into the top 10, Brian, Canadians have forward prospects, defense prospects, weirdly a lot of goalie prospects. What's the weakest area of the pool? The Canadians draft pool, and like their prospects generally are regarded as top 5, top 3, top 10 in the NHL. Is there a weak point?
I mean, I never thought I'd say this, but left-hand defense. But okay. Even then, like, I like Engstrom a lot. He's definitely in the top 10 for me. I don't know if he is for you. I think he should be, but I don't know. I don't know that there's a weakness at goalie. There definitely is not. Like, I I had to keep myself from putting 3 goalies in my top 10 just because of their level, because and probably Volokin should be in there, but I didn't include him because I wanted to include more forwards and Ds. So it's definitely not goaltending. At forward, we have maybe the best prospect
outside of the NHL,
league.
yeah. 100%.
Outside of the NHL, to be clear, Ivan Demidov is that guy. David Reinbacher looks excellent. Mayu has shown a bunch. Engstrom, as I said. So at D, we're fine. There is no weak point in the prospect pool right now at all. So as you always say, and I'll take the words out of your mouth before you even say them, the key now is to continue that trend for years forward. Like, as long as they're not buying at the deadline and giving up all their assets, keep the prospect pool full at all positions. It just gives you so much more versatility for trades and for, if you get injuries, all that stuff. Like, that's really the key moving forward, is you close out the rebuild the last year or two before you're in contention.
Exactly. If I were to say there's a weakness, and this is going to sound dumb because everyone wants it, but highly skilled forwards. We have Demidov at the front end. Hage is there. And then it's a lot of solid, good hockey player, Beck or Jack-Eye or Thorpe. Like, it's kind of a lot of he's good, but no swings on breakthrough talent, really. If I'm to really specifically identify now, again, having Ivan Demidov kind of on the other side of the seesaw really helps things out. So I'm not complaining too loudly, but if there's something where I'm going to going through the list, I get to a point where I'm like, there's not a lot of spice when it comes to the forwards once you get past the top 2 guys. Okay. And that's not bad, because there's a lot of guys that definitely still grade out right now as oh yeah, they'll be in the NHL. Oh, I can see him in a playoff series in 2 years. But there's not many I see him as a difference maker on the offensive side of the ice right now. And part of that is just guys graduating out. Like Lane Hudson was that guy. He graduated out. Now he's on the team. I don't have to worry about it. So maybe I'm just it's a narrow view of your team, right? It's everyone ages 18 to 23 basically, minus the ones who are super duper good because they're already on the team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're now in the sort of second or third, depending how you view this rebuild of the process, where a lot of those young players have already joined the NHL, are already very good, skilled, putting up numbers, and so. I don't know. I find it very hard to point a finger and say, it's the skilled forward element that we're lacking, or that it's, that's the weak point when you have Demidov and Hage. Like, one of them was the freshman of the year in the Big Ten of the NCAA, and Demidov is just godly. I have some stats about him that are just so impressive for later. But the drop off, maybe that's what we should be talking about, because it's Demidov, then there's a small drop to Hage, or a moderate drop to Hage, and then there's a giant drop in terms of skill to the next guys. Who's the most skilled forward after them? Is it Beck, who's more of a defensive guy anyway? Is it Farrell? Machar, actually, maybe. Just his hands are sick and he's got good playmaking. I don't know, but it's not it's this guy. He look at what he can do. Look at his shot. No, it's okay, there's a sizable drop off now. Now I think though, and I haven't done this because it would just take a huge amount of time, but I haven't compared our top end forwards, our skilled forwards, and then the drop off to other teams' drop offs. But I imagine it's very similar.
Probably is,
including teams that have been drafting high for years.
It's because
the rebuilding.
It's also because
teams.
those guys don't stay as prospects for too long.
Of course,
So Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky are all on 8-year contracts. Look, this is a bit concern trolling. Really, it's all that it is. Let's get into it. Let's get into our top 10. One interesting argument, or one interesting discussion to bring up. I'll bring it up later. It's in reference to Sean Farrell, but we can get into it later. Top 10 prospects. Okay. Number 1 in his own tier. Not that I tiered these out, but in his own tier, obviously, is Ivan Demidov. I am so excited to be done with this drama of him being a 13th forward, him playing 4 minutes in the first game of the playoffs, basically not playing at all. And then in the second game, he plays, a dozen minutes or so, scores a goal. He's creating chances. He's out there in overtime. He's so freaking good. He still is. He has a nose for the net. That's something I've noticed really in the second game of their playoff series with St. Petersburg. I'm excited to see him on the team. He's a very recognizable skater. He has a lot of talent. He has a nose for the net. He's a great playmaker. He's not too dissimilar from Patrick Laine on the defensive end. But I also wonder some St. Louis. I do wonder some St. Louis coaching at age 19, age 20 is going to go a lot further than it is with Patrick Laine. I also would like to seeing him on a smaller size rink will also, might be one of the few guys you want to see dressed up 4 or 5 preseason games next year.
and playing for a coach who's not going to bench him because he doesn't want to sign a contract. Like, imagine how much more motivated he'll be to learn from Martin St. Louis than from a coach within an organization that wouldn't play him because he wants to come to the best league in the world.
Yeah.
So I think just that motivation factor, he'll be willing to learn. And Marty has made some pretty bad defensive players decent enough. So I think that he'll be able to do that with Demidov too. I want to get into some stats, Jordan, because what an unbelievable career so far in the KHL Ivan Demidov has had. This season, 49 points, 19 goals, 30 assists, and 65 games played. Their regular season has just ended, as you said. Playoffs are 2 games in. He already potted that goal. But this regular season, that 49 points that he scored, this is the highest scoring season by a 19-year-old in KHL history. He leads by 7 points over Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov. Ever heard of him? Holy crap. That's pretty good company. Just beneath that is, yes, Matvei Michkov and Evgeny Kuznetsov. So a little poetry there that he's playing with him now. Mm-hmm. And even if you include the 20-year-old seasons in the KHL, Demidov is still first. He's tied for first with Danila Yurov's season last year, actually, which is kind of interesting. So when you look at these stats, and you should because they're super impressive, go on wherever you get your stats online and check this out for the KHL. Kaprizov, Kuznetsov, and yes, Michkov, they all have more impressive points per game numbers. But I want to give you 2 reasons why Demidov is having, had, I should say, a much more outstanding season as a 19-year-old than any of those players did at 19. The first thing, we already alluded to it, his ice time was so limited because he refused on multiple occasions to re-sign with St. Petersburg. So each time he said no to a deal, his ice time would drop significantly for the next few games. So if you just look at points per game, you're including the 16 games where he played fewer than 10 minutes, sometimes as low as 3 minutes 17, 3 minutes 22. Those were 2 games at the beginning of October. So it's not a level playing field. Because of this, I would much rather look at points per 60 for a more accurate reading of his scoring in comparison to these other young Russian stars. And he's first in that by far. So not even close. And then the other point, the second point I want to bring up, Demidov did everything at 5-on-5. All of his 19 goals were scored at even strength, whereas Kaprizov, he had 5 power play goals, Michkov had 4, Kuznetsov had 7, so that's padding their stats considerably. And he had to do everything at 5-on-5, Demidov that is, because he played on average just under a minute and a half, a minute 25 of power play time per game. That's over a minute less than Michkov got last season and over 2 minutes left than Kuznetsov did in his 19-year-old campaign. So those 2 points, the fact that he was benched for silliness and the fact that he barely got any power play time for most of the year, and even when he did, it was limited. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Demidov has had by far the most impressive campaign as a 19-year-old ever in the KHL, and he's up there with the best 20-year-old seasons too.
So are we good with Alex Newhook centering him then?
Who cares?
Does it matter? Does it matter?
Put Pezzetta.
Well, let's not do that.
Let's not do that, absolutely. But yeah, you know what? Newhook, if nothing else, Newhook's pace and processing speed, I think, would jive well with him.
Yeah.
And you know what? Demidov to Laine, that thread, we always talked about the Suzuki to Caulfield line is the most dangerous line on the ice. It's quickly turned into Hudson Laine on the power play. But Demidov to Laine, Demidov to Caulfield, Demidov to frickin' Armia, it doesn't matter. Like, he's such a good playmaker. And that's the other thing here too, is he destroys in terms of assists. Like, he's very close to all these other guys in terms of goals in their 19 seasons, but 30 assists for Demidov, it beats everybody by 7 or 8. So very impressive playmaking.
I think the Hudson to Demidov in transition will be just death immediately in the NHL.
Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about Ivan Demidov, and we will, I promise, for hours.
This could have been the entire half-hour segment, Jordan. Is just, we have a top 10, but let's just talk about Demidov. Holy crap, he's exciting.
Okay, so Demidov also, just for the record, was number 1. He's last year after the draft. He will remain number 1 until he graduates out, which I will presume is going to be sometime in October. Number 2, I had David Reinbacher at number 2. I do think very much in the same tier as Jacob Fowler at number 3. And I think a clear 4, and I'll stop at this, is Michael Hage. I think it's a bit of a drop at that point. This is very close, though. Listen, if not for the injuries, I think Reinbacher is a clear 2. And everything I've seen from the 8 games he's played in Laval has told me he is ready for the NHL. It's just, he's not playing much. And the Habs and the Rocket are being a little mysterious as to what's going on. Like, he didn't skate for 4 or 5 days, and then he came back for a game or 2, and then he didn't skate again. He didn't play in this past weekend's matches either. Just a little worried there. That's all. That's
Yeah.
That and I'd be okay with someone saying, you know what, because of that, Jacob Fowler should be number 2, because Jacob Fowler had like a 1.6 goals against average and a 940 save percentage on an incredible team, to be
insane.
clear. And we are recording this before Fowler goes up against the University of Denver in the second round of the Frozen Four. So we don't know if his season's over. He might go to Laval. He might not. I'd presume he's a Rocket starter next year. We can talk about Hage maybe separately, but do you agree with that order of like Ryan Bacher just an absolute like a hair above Fowler, and understanding if someone wants to flip it for those reasons?
Yes, all three of these guys are so close together. Honestly, I had Hage above Fowler initially, and now that you're talking about Fowler, and I can't argue how impressive his season was. I had Hage above him just because of that thing we always talk about. Your first line center is the most important player on your team. Your second line center is the second most important. And so Michael Hage could step into that role. So his ceiling being so high as a second line center, even maybe a first line center if all goes well, like that's a really, really, really high ceiling. Is an elite goaltender above an elite second line center? That's an interesting debate for sure. But that was the reason I had Hage above. Who he will be returning to Michigan next year after a successful, from outside perspective, a successful freshman season. From his perspective, almost successful. He scored 34 points in 33 games, some very important goals in there to win games and keep his team sort of in the hunt, and he was named Big Ten Freshman of the Year, the highest honor for a freshman. Now, if he played so well and he was even the best freshman in the Big Ten, why on earth did I say that his season was almost successful? Here's a quote from Hage. I want to go back and win a championship, end quote. He's a team-first guy for whom individual accolades, they don't mean anything. They pale in comparison to winning a championship with his team. So, and that's obviously, that's a quality we both love to see in a player, by the way. Like, that's super impressive. The way Michael Hage plays and is just able to use time and space to open things up offensively will translate definitely to professional hockey and eventually the NHL when he gets there. But for now, he is, in fact, going back to try and win. And you know what? Maybe this is the defining factor that puts Fowler above him, because unlike Fowler, there's no reason for him to return to college hockey next year. He's way too good for it, right? Like Fowler, it's not a fair fight for other teams. They have to take on average 16 shots in order to score a single goal.
Yeah.
Like ridiculous. Combined record, I'll jump into some stats for Fowler here, and then I'll let you jump in on all of them. But a combined record of his 2 seasons for Fowler, 57, 12, and 3. Oh my God. Obviously he has a great team, but a lot of that's him. Combined save percentage, well over 930, and combined goals against average, well below 2. That's across both his years at collegiate hockey. So excellent examples of why he'll be playing pro next season. And also, as you said, the Eagles have a chance to clinch a spot tonight on Sunday. And, by the time you're hearing this, hopefully they have clinched against the defending champs, the team they lost to in Denver last season. So if he wins, he will have done everything he needs to do at BC and more. But regardless if the Eagles win or not, I think he'll be playing for the Laval Rocket at the start of next year and on an ELC from Montreal and as the starter, as you said. Like Primo ain't taking his spot.
No, Primo's out of here unless he's okay sticking around in Laval. Primo's probably done. So on the Fowler Hage one, I think I agree. Yeah, a second. It's actually an interesting discussion of what is more valuable, second line center or a stud goalie. I think we still tend to lean second line center. However, I think Fowler's closer to realizing being the stud goalie than Hage is to being the second line center. If we're saying Fowler's at like 70% fully realized, I think Hage is still closer to like 50%. Now, one guy's a year older than the other. That'll make a difference. But so that's a slight, it is a flip. I will say last year we had Fowler at 5 and Hage at 4. So it's a slight flip this year. And obviously Hudson got removed from the top 5. So everybody kind of went up a spot. Ryan Bacher went from 3 to 2. So that's a top 4. Moving on, 5, 6, and 7 to me, Brian, throw them in a blender. I have no freaking clue. I had Owen Beck at 5, Adam Engstrom at 6, and Oliver Kapanen at 7. That is that is a group I have together. There's one obvious omission I have not put in there that some people might be yelling at, but it's so close between Beck, Engstrom, Kapanen. Kapanen is a first-line center in the SHL, was point per game this season after having an okay dozen games or so with the Montreal Canadiens. We've seen Beck a little bit also with the Habs, and he's a very good second-line center right now on the Laval Rocket. And then Adam Engstrom, slotted in like super under the radar. He has been the under the radar draft pick of the past 3 seasons, really. And to me, it's getting to a point where I'm asking the question, is Engstrom going to have a better career than Arbor Xhekaj? Because that's the spot that he's coming for.
Yeah.
So everything I've seen from Engstrom for the last 2+ seasons to me is like pointed towards like responsible left-handed defenseman, nowhere near a shutdown, but with a bit of offensive spark. And we've seen that offensive spark really materialize this season in his rookie season in Laval. I love everything I've seen. So he's bumped up a few spots. He's went from 9 up to 6 from last year. Beck's gone from 7 to 5, and Kapanen's gone from 10 up to 7. But again, with these three, like, I think Beck Kapanen's gonna be a fascinating camp discussion because they're likely going to be battling for. Oh, I mean, depending, but like between Newhook and Doc and Beck and Kapanen, like they're going to be battling for some type of center position. Someone has to be third line center, and if not, one of them might be the winger spot if Armia is gone. So some of these guys might graduate. And yeah, it's like Beck is super solid. I mean, Beck and Kapanen play very similarly. Neither are overly physical, but both are very cerebral and smart. And that is something you want in your third line center.
Absolutely. No question about that. I think Owen Beck gets the edge just because he's shown it at the NHL level. Kapanen hasn't had the opportunity to do so. So just on that front, like
he played 10 games at the beginning of the year.
I know. I'm even counting those 10 games. Owen Beck at the NHL level, I phrased it wrong, but what I meant was Beck looked like he belonged more than Kapanen did.
Got you.
Is that fair to say?
Sure. I mean, yeah, whatever.
It's a tiny sample size. It's a tiny sample size, but I think Beck at the NHL level
fair enough.
Looked like he belonged a little bit more, especially in transition. I felt that he was very comfortable in transition. Kapanen was decent as well, though. I'm splitting hairs.
That's what it is
with you because you're right. They're so close, and Engstrom is in that. I'm very curious to know who the guy that you left out is. Is it the goalie who's proven it at the NHL level and then hasn't of late, or is it the defenseman who everybody wants to be better than he actually is?
It's that guy. It's Logan Mailloux.
Yeah,
it's Mailloux was at 8 last year, is still at 8 this year, which means he's been jumped by a few people. To round out the top 10, and we can open the discussion up. I do have Jakub Dobish at 9. Who was previously unranked, but also kind of 11th. He was ranked at this time last year, but then he fell out of the top 10 for the post-draft ranking. So he's been in and around the top 10. I had Florian Xhekaj at 10.
Okay, nice.
Maybe that's just me throwing a bone for a guy who's having a great season, going to close in on 20 goals as a rookie in his age 20 season, like, is doing great. So Mailloux's the one guy that I know I've gotten flack online in the past for having Engstrom above Mailloux, and I feel more and more confident in that take. I've had that take, I think, for 2 years now. I feel more and more confident every time we come back to this discussion. It's not to say Mailloux's not going to be a good right-handed defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens. I think it's absolutely still in the cards. I just think Adam Engstrom is better than him, and the right-handedness might even it out a bit, but that's the one guy. Do you agree with my take on, like, I've had Engstrom over Mailloux for a while, but I mean, not that Mailloux's not having a good season. It's just there are the deficiencies with Mailloux's game that have not really changed, even in his 2 years in Laval.
And those deficiencies are what make the difference between a mainstay and an NHL defenseman who doesn't get into games, a seventh who can't get in because he's exposed. So I agree. I agree with this take. Engstrom, as you said, he's not phenomenal offensively or defensively. He's a good, solid two-way guy who, in all situations, is going to be good enough. So that's a third pairing guy for the time being. He improves any one of those facets, and maybe there's top four potential. But the top four potential that everybody sees offensively with Mailloux is complete. The rug is just completely pulled so hard out from under his feet when you talk about his defense, because he can't be a guy playing 20 minutes or even close to 20 minutes in the NHL the way he defends. It's just not feasible. It just isn't, flat out. So as much as that sucks, because I think that he's a really fun player to watch, his booming slap shot, the way that he's able to thread the needle on shots, and his deceptiveness is very good. Like he's got that pump fake thing that he's got down pat. Like he fools guys all the time with it. Yeah, all the offensive stuff is really fun, but you have to be able to defend. And I don't know, I'm getting bored of hearing myself say that, even because I've said it about 1,000 times about Mailloux, hoping that the next time I talk about him, I'm going to go, you know what he improved? His defense. Yeah. And it hasn't happened quickly enough.
That said, I am fully on board for him playing 40 games with the Habs next year, and just let's roll the ball out and see what happens.
That's fine. That's fine, because Hudson's going to be playing 29 minutes. Gooley's going to be playing 28. Carrier and Matheson are probably going to get 25 each. So, yeah, there's about 6-7 minutes there for Mailloux.
Right.
Something like that.
So, closing it out here, and I guess the others that I had kind of in the honorable mention zone, you mentioned Evgeny Volokhin It was like, am I really going to put 3 goalies in the top 10? He was right outside. Sean Farrell has just turned it all the way on. Phil Michar, I still believe in you. I'm not giving up. I'm keeping all my stock. Farrell, interestingly, and it's also true for William Trudeau, technically Emil Heineman, they will lose their waiver exemptions next season, meaning they would have to go through waivers if you want them to play on the Rocket. Now, obviously, Emil Heineman's graduated. He's a Hab now. It doesn't matter. Farrell needs a contract, and that contract would have to be an NHL one. Well, not an NHL one, but he would need an NHL roster spot next year, unless you want to risk losing him. I don't know if he's done enough. He's turned it on these last 30 games or so after having a brutal start. Also, by the way, good timing for us. Congratulations to Caden Gooley on no longer being waiver exempt. You did it, kid. You've played 160 games in the league. Today was the last game that Caden Gooley could have played without needing to clear waivers. So your nightmares are over, Caden. You'll never have to go to Laval.
Not that.
Who among us?
Yeah, not that there was any chance
he's never played there for one.
Oh my god!
I just thought it was funny. I was going over who was waiver exempt and who was still going to be eligible, and I was just looking at the list, and Gooley was at 159 out of 160, and I was like, "This is it. They got to make their choice before this Panthers game. It's over." So Farrell's the one guy where they're gonna have to make a decision because he needs to go through waivers. I mean, he might not get picked up. It also might not matter anymore. Was there anyone else that kind of like in and around the edges of the top 10? You mentioned Volokin briefly. That
Thorpe is right at the bottom of those guys, and Jared Davidson I wanted to throw in as well, just because he's been very solid, and and he doesn't look ready. He certainly doesn't look as ready as like Beck did, but he's close. He's pretty close to being ready for like a fourth line center, style role, something like that. Maybe even a winger to start.
I know this is the podcast that loves Jake Evans, and I'm happy he's on the contract that he so deservedly got, and it's nowhere near a bad contract. But like Jared Davidson, Luke Tuck, Owen Beck, Oliver Kapanen, there's a lot of bottom 6 talent that's going to be much cheaper than that. That's all I'm going to say.
No, yeah, Evans brings something to the table that none of those guys do yet. Beck, I think, has the highest potential to do so, but just the penalty killing acumen that Jake Evans has, he's like top in the league, and you could take that with a grain of salt if you want. I think a lot of hockey fans undervalue being a good penalty killer, but Jake Evans sets the standard on the Montreal Canadiens, and so next year I love it. The years after that, the 3 years of the contract after that, when Beck is probably ready to jump in there, that's when it's going to come to a head, and so that'll be very, very interesting. As we said when the contract was signed, though, like, not going to be hard to move. No. If they decide that Beck and Kapanen or any combination of these two guys are ready to take center roles, it's really not a hard contract to move at all. I am very curious. I'm happy you brought up the contract situation of Sean Farrell, because I have no idea how they'll approach it. My gut tells me is that they're not going to be willing to do it.
So I don't know the intricacies of the CBA, but I wonder if the Canadiens would be cool giving him like certainly I think a 1 year 2-way deal would be the Canadiens' preference. Maybe 2 years 2-way deal. So that way, if you send them down, it's a different salary and you don't affect your own cap. And if you lose them to waivers, you lose them to waivers. But that might be what I would prefer. Certainly Farrell and his team would prefer a multi-year, even if it's league minimum contract. That's one way. And again, one way has nothing to do with waivers. It just means whether you're in the NHL versus the AHL, your salary does or does not change. That's what I think the discussion will be. I think it's worth keeping him around. And it's also like, it's a bit of a tale about like these NCAA guys that burn the first year of their contract. Because Farrell burned that first year immediately, he only had 2 years in the AHL rather than 3. So the decision time might be up, and it could be where the Habs say, we're good, we're done, rather than giving you that third year that you burned. It's just,
I wonder if this one case alters the way that they approach that. But they had to, based on his level at the time, they had to give it to him because he would have gotten it elsewhere.
That's how the CBA is set up, and that is, I would presume, if Jacob Fowler wants to sign in the next week or two, the Rocket are going to have to give him a game to burn that contract year. They did it with Struble. They'll do it with they did it with Florian Jacki last year, I believe, although that might have been a slightly different one because it was a CHL contract. Taylor's oldest time, Lane Hudson obviously was the big one from last year. So yeah, that's it. I think that's our top 10. So slight changes, a couple moves up here or there. Kapanen, I think, was the biggest mover going up Engstrom. Actually, Engstrom and Kapanen, both the biggest movers going up from each respectively from 10-9 to 7-6. So, but other than that, it's all about Ivan Demidov, Jacob Fowler, David Reinbacher, Michael Hage. Those are the four. If those four hit, it doesn't matter what happens with the other guys. As they do all right, and no one else pops off in a huge way. If those four hit, we're raising a banner in the next 5 to 6 years. That's what I'll say.
And I think we should celebrate or just sort of tip our caps to the very last time that the prospect pool of the Montreal Canadiens is going to be this strong moving forward, because Demidov and Reinbacher in all likelihood are joining the team next year. So your top prospect being Michael Hage, still pretty good. I still love Michael Hage, or Jacob Fowler, actually. You had Fowler above him. Still great, but like it's not Demidov and Reinbacher at the top. But what that means is the Canadiens have a contender brewing. And a few short years from now, that's going to be pretty darn sweet.
And 2 first-round picks. So we'll see what they do with that. With that, we'll end the episode. This was a fun episode of This Week in Habsland. Thank you for beating the Panthers on Sunday. Please do it again. It would be even more fun to keep beating them. So especially no more road games in Sunrise where we have to hear the stupid cat roar. It drives me. It's worse than the cannon in Columbus. The roar is 10 times worse than the cannon. Anyways, you can follow us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at HabslandPod. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.